Hello again, everybody. It is not everybody's favorite, not Goth BF. Tintle Meth. Yes, I said Tintle Meth. Not Tintle Death, but Tintle Meth. Because I always look like I'm on fucking drugs or something. At least that's what people say. Anyways, yeah, I have a little bit of a lisp. Just because I have the vampire fangs in right now. See. Anyways, we're gonna take them out. Because it's not helping to lisp any bit. Anyways, today's discussion, and you've probably heard about this, you've probably seen it in your life, and you probably already know the answers, but allow me to provide an alternative take to this discussion. Today's discussion is, why are young people turning to retro and vintage objects or media, or just older movies or older music in general? Specifically older, more vintage media, right? What's driving young people to turn to older and more vintage media? And some of you guys probably already know the answers, right? Some of you guys already know, because TikTok aesthetics. That's one of the reasons. A lot of people on TikTok, they make aesthetic edits, which is basically it's a form of video where it's kind of like a montage of, of a specific era or a specific genre, to really capture that feeling of that genre or that era, to try to get people, more interested in it or feeling nostalgic. So people make, 1980s edits, 80s aesthetic, where it has people dressed in 80s fashion with 80s music, stuff like that. So, that might be one of the reasons why you normally hear people get consumed in this old media or find attraction towards it. Or maybe even you've probably heard, a lot of people just like older music and how they feel that a lot more modern music is just soulless and stuff, which we can argue about that. I'm an audiophile, not to be confused with a pedophile like Diddy. Audiophile, big difference in words there. Anyways, you've probably heard all those reasons, or some people just want to see the stuff that their parents were in, and some people find that cool. But here's an alternative reason, a very different take from every reason you've probably heard under the sun. And one of my coworkers, that's no longer at her job, he said something like, all these kids these days want to relive the 80s, because that person who said this, they were like a teenager or a young adult in the 80s, but they were saying something along the lines of, all these kids these days want to relive my childhood, but don't want to have to deal with all the negative stuff that came from the media and stuff we consumed at that time, right? And this is an alternative take to why people may find, attraction towards old and more vintage media and stuff like that. And you've probably never heard of this reason. But it's because they're trying to find meaning or understanding in the adult world, right? You get fresh out of high school, a lot of times even before high school, you're excited for that adult world. You're ready, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get my first car if you haven't already have a car. I'm gonna get my first job. I'm gonna be rich, millionaire status, baby, millionaire status. We're gonna be like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, we making our bangs. Debt collection, sexism, yeah. No, I'm just kidding. That last part, no. Anyways, a lot of people have high expectations and high hopes after high school, which there's nothing wrong with that, and some people, they achieve their dreams in the first few years after high school. Some people, they really go above and beyond it, and first few years after high school, they're living like Larry, man. They're living all the way to the top. Some people, their dreams unfortunately get shattered and things don't work too well after high school. And so, for a lot of people after high school, entering the adult world, getting to live on your own, be your own person, be your own individual, there's a lot of high expectations that you set for yourself. And a lot of times those expectations, sometimes those expectations meet reality, and sometimes you're utterly crushed and defeated, right? And sometimes you get lost. Sometimes you get lost when you fail to meet those expectations. And it's not even just that. A lot of times in the adult world, especially, when you're entering your 20s, you try to find meaning. You try to make understanding of this world. Because when you're in high school, right? When you're in high school, you know, of course, you see what's going on the internet, you see what's going on the news, but you still don't have a full understanding of the extent of the world till you exit high school, and you have to start seeing things a lot more for yourself, right? You have to see how people treat each other in the workplace. You have to see how rude and crude people can be, right? And especially now in the time we live in, consumed by short form media, aka TikToks and stuff like that, which nothing wrong against it, nothing bad against it. It's just, people get consumed by it. Or, outrage culture being everywhere, people just being outraged about everything and anything. And people, just having the guts these days to just say all types of mean crap to each other on the internet that they wouldn't say they wouldn't say to each other in real life. You get lost in all of this madness. You try to make a reasoning of it. You try to make understanding of it. Like, yo, what the fuck's up with these people? Why the fuck are people so toxic online? Why can't I just post a piece of my artwork without people, sending death threats to me? Which, yeah, that's an actual thing that happened with the Steven Universe. Oh man, we got a freaking ad. Let's skip through the ad real quick.
That's legal.
Okay. Anyways, that happened with the Steven Universe fandom a few years ago, where one of the artists, and it was a young kid too. It was a kid, like an underage person. They made a piece of art in their style and their vision, and let's just say they got bullied so badly. I think they tried to off themselves, and that was pretty rough. But a lot of times you're trying to find understanding in this modern age we live in. You're trying to find understanding in dating, since dating now is different than it was 20, 30 years ago, right? You're trying to understand society now because it's different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. You're trying to understand womanhood now, or you're trying to understand manhood now because, of course, it's a different game now than it was 20 years ago. And you're trying to make sense of everything around you in this current age of technology, the internet, and social media, right? And so for a lot of young men and women, and this is really geared towards young men, and a lot of young men begin to look to the past to try to make understanding of today. And a lot of times when they look to the past, they look at those old movies from the 80s or the 70s or 90s. They look to the old music. They understand it was simpler. It was much, it was much more simple. It was much more simple. And for a lot of guys and a lot of people, they're trying to just understand. They're just trying to find guidance in this world we live in. And so they look to the past. They look at those old movies. They look at the old Steven Spielberg movies where people had to go on adventures and they had to go through hardships. They look at those old, 80s, 90s rom-coms to try to understand, romance and why the heck it's so hard for them to, find love in this world. And a lot of those older movies, right? A lot of those older movies from the 80s and 90s offer different perspectives to life. They offer commentary on society, commentary that talks about American society, commentary that talks about all, life, just commentary that a lot of young men can understand. So for a lot of young men, because a lot of young men these days, they feel let down. They feel like they were let down being raised as men. So they look towards, and this is not all young men that consume older media, but there's a good chunk of them where they look towards older media to find understanding and guidance in the world we live in. They might look to these older movies to try to understand, what is it to be a man, right? What is it to be a man? Or what is it to be a woman? Or what is it to be in love? Because unfortunately, modern society complicates the fuck out of everything. And I just don't fucking understand why the fuck we have to complicate all of these things. Why must we complicate these things, dude? Like, why must we complicate simple concepts, right? And so, like I said, a lot of men and a lot of women and a lot of individuals, they may just look towards these older movies just to, find understanding, find simple understanding for their life as an adult. And a lot of times they might even use those things they learn in those older movies to help them, as they grow older into, the adult world. And I mean, that's just really how it is for a lot of people. Like, I know a lot of men right now, and this is a huge thing. A lot of men right now are struggling to find out who they are as men, right? And it doesn't help with the fact, and this does not help with the fact that you go online these days, and you can't deny it. And this is not me saying, oh yeah, let's defend all men. Before we continue, don't get me wrong, 10 Till Death has seen the sexist comments and shit made towards women. I'm not denying it. I'm not excusing it, right? It's not good. It's not good. But the issue is when a lot of Gen Z men were being raised for a society, for a time period that no longer exists growing up. And so they feel let down as men, right? And then they go online and they just see all these hate comments about them, about how they deserve to die because they're men. And a lot of those men, they read these hate comments and they already still don't know, where the hell they fucking fit in this world. And they still don't even understand themselves as men because there's just so much stacked against them. They were failed being raised as men. And they go online, they just have to see all this shit about how they should die. And for a lot of these men, it just throws them into this confusion. They try to make sense of modern society. They try to make understanding of their role as a human being, and they just can't. And so they turn to these older movies where, things were portrayed more simple to look for guidance, to look for understanding as a man. Now, or understanding as a human being. Now, is this is this me trying to say, oh yeah, turn to the 80s movies, turn to the 90s movies to look for guidance as an adult? No. There's some things in those 80s and 90s movies that, of course, wouldn't fly today, in American society, of course. Like sexism, of course. But, it's like I said, for a lot of young men and a lot of young individuals, they're just looking for guidance in the adult world. And with social media and the internet just complicating everything, people are looking for a much more simple understanding, a much more back to the basics approach by consuming some of this older media to understand themselves and try to figure out who they are in this world. And like I said, also for guidance. Thoughts? Comments? Leave them all below. Did you agree with this video? If so, comment below. If you didn't agree with this video, comment below. I'm not going to harass you. Unfortunately, some of my fans will go out of their way to harass you, and sometimes I have to step into comments and tell them that, chill out. Yeah, I really do step into comments sometimes and tell my fans to chill out. It happens. Should never happen, but, there was even one time I had to argue with one of my fans on it. Crazy. Thoughts, comments, anything, comment down below. Till next time, this has been Tinto Meth. Peace.